On everyone, welcome back to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons all year long. I'm your host. My name is Kyle Garrison. I'm over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. So come on over, say hello, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from you guys. With that being said, let's jump right into today's video. So first thing I want to talk about is Nickeil Alexander-Walker and why I think he would be a good fit on the Pistons. And then I want to talk about Dennis Schroder, who is getting some serious interest from teams around the league like the Mavericks, like the Kings. So I'll talk about that. And then I want to dive into Jalen Duren and whether or not I think he will be extended this season and what the Pistons front office kind of believes the future of Jalen Duren looks like. And then lastly, I want to just touch on the young core overall. I know a lot of people are on Trajan Langdon's case about going out and making a big acquisition this offseason, but I just want to touch on the young core and why we should still have hope if the Pistons do decide to just run it back completely. But first things first, let's talk about Nickeil Alexander-Walker. With Naz Reid getting a 5-year, $125 million contract from the Timberwolves, he opted out of his player option and was able to secure that $25 million a year bag. And Julius Randle is a free agent as well for Minnesota. So they're going to have some decisions to make. I don't think that they're going to bring back Nickeil Alexander-Walker. They won't have the money. They're a second apron team. And obviously, with the Naz Reid signing, a potential Julius Randle signing, they're going to be pretty expensive. So I would like to see the Pistons at least try and inquire about Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think he's a significant upgrade from Tim Hardaway Jr. He's only 26 years old. He fits the timeline much better. He's just as good, if not a better, three-point shooter than Tim Hardaway Jr. He's an unbelievable defender. He played only 25 minutes a game last year, but it was an increased role compared to what he's seen in previous years. And I just love the strides that Nickeil Alexander-Walker is making. Last year, he was incredible as a playmaker and as a ball handler as well, which would give the Pistons some flexibility in that backcourt. He's more of a combo guard, but the 3-and-D presence that he brings, he's an unbelievable defender. Last year, he was in the 96th percentile for regularized adjusted defensive turnover, 75 percentile in deflections. Very impressive, 70 percentile for rim frequency, which for a smaller guard is very, very impressive. It's essentially the percentage of opponent shot attempts that are defended at the rim. So he's able to contest. He can play against bigger guards. I love his versatility overall on both sides of the floor. Creation, he was in the 64th percentile, which wasn't great last year, but he was very solid as a ball handler as well, 76 percentile passer rating. So he's not on the upper echelon of guards when it comes to that, but he can come off the bench. He'll play good defense. He can take some point guard minutes and some ball handling minutes if Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham are off the floor. And I just really like the fit overall. I think he's much more adaptable to this team than Tim Hardaway Jr. So that is kind of the direction I would like to see them go. He defends at just such a high level, has such a high motor. And the Pistons really do need perimeter defense. You look at Cade Cunningham, Jaden Ivey, Tim Hardaway Jr., Malik Beasley. They all really struggle on the defensive end. And if you just have Asar Thompson as the lockdown defender on the perimeter, you need some flexibility. We saw when Asar Thompson wasn't on the floor, Jalen Brunson absolutely dominated in the playoffs. So I think the Pistons should at least inquire about a guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker. I think he fits very well with this team. But let me know in the comments what you think of Na and if you'd like to see the Pistons explore a sign and trade with him this offseason. I'm not sure what the sign and trade would look like entirely, but I think the Pistons should at least try and figure out a deal with the Timberwolves and just see what it might cost. And then moving on, let's talk about Dennis Schroder. I know I mentioned him earlier. If Dennis Schroder decides to walk, Nickeil Alexander-Walker becomes even more of a commodity that I think the Pistons should pursue. And over the past couple weeks, reports have come out that Sacramento is going to heavily pursue Dennis Schroder, and it makes sense. I do think Dennis is going to leave for multiple reasons, and the big one being the Kings can offer him a much bigger role in their offense. The Pistons are probably going to offer him about 20-25 minutes max a night just with their crowded backcourt, especially if you bring back Tim Hardaway Jr. and Malik Beasley. You have Marcus Sasser you're trying to develop, and then obviously Jaden and Cade are your starting backcourt. And the Kings can really offer him a big role on this Kings team because Malik Monk and Zach LaVine are both kind of tweener guards. They don't really have a backup point guard or a rotational ball handler. And I think that Dennis Schroder can be that. I don't think Malik Monk played all that well as the primary ball handler. He was okay, but I think Dennis Schroder can be a lot better for them, and they can have some more flexibility in their offense, because having a guy like Malik Monk and Zach LaVine on the floor at the same time with Dennis Schroder, who can facilitate, can also create his own shot, I think is a very enticing offer for Sacramento. And I do believe that Dennis Schroder is going to be interested in trying to go get a bigger role, and probably for more money than the Pistons would be able to offer them. I think the Kings could offer Dennis Schroder the full mid-level exception. So that would be interesting to see how that plays out. Maybe it's a sign and trade for Jake LaRavia. I know I've talked about that. I wouldn't mind that at all. If you are going to lose Dennis Schroder, instead of just letting him walk for absolutely nothing, you might as well get a rotational piece back that can stretch the floor, especially a position of need that we've talked about. The Pistons desperately need some rotational minutes at the forward position, and I think Jake LaRavia could be that. And Dennis Schroder, at the expense of Dennis Schroder, it would be tough, and a lot of Pistons fans would be bummed, but I think it would be the right decision for the long-term future of this franchise. But yeah, let me know in the comments if you would be okay with losing Dennis Schroder, or if you want to try and retain him. It's going to be interesting to see what direction the front office goes. But just let me know your thoughts, and we'll talk about that more as the free agency period starts to approach. We'll discuss Dennis Schroder overall, and some more free agency signings as well. But speaking of extensions and retaining players, Jalen Duren is a guy who is due for an extension next year, or this year actually. He'll be a free agent next offseason. So the Pistons could explore extending him right now while he's still going to be relatively cheap. If he does make a ton of strides offensively, defensively, looks like a completely different player, he could be owed a ton more going into next season. So it might be smart to try and nail him down now, especially with Daniel Gafford just getting a $25 million a year contract. I think Jalen Duren will probably get a similar amount. I think 4 years, $100 million to start. And then I think his team and his agents will try and push that up to around 4 years, $120 to $128 million, which, are you okay with giving Jalen Duren $30 million plus a year if he doesn't show significant improvement on the defensive end? That's just going to be the question that you have to answer if you're Trajan Langdon and JB Bickerstaff. I mean, I'm personally just very indifferent about Jalen Duren. I do like him, but I also would like to have Ausar on the floor as much as possible. And like I mentioned in the previous section, having Ausar Thompson off the floor poses some very difficult defensive decision-making that JB Bickerstaff has to make, especially with the lack of perimeter defense that this team does have. But, like we've talked about in previous episodes, Ausar Thompson makes Jalen Duren such a better defender. There's so many different things that Ausar does on the floor that complements Jalen Duren's defensive game. But at the end of the day, do you have to rely on Ausar and Jalen Duren on the floor at the same time? That's right there. You only have 3 floor spacers if those 2 guys are on the floor at the same time. We've talked about it before. We'll talk about it again. It's a very interesting floor spacing scenario, especially with a guy like Cade Cunningham. Jaden Ivey comes back, also a guy that benefits from floor spacing. So I don't think necessarily that Jalen Duren is going to be easy to let go if they were to let him walk next offseason, because somebody offers him a bigger role, or somebody offers him more money and sees him as a piece of their future. But it is an embarrassment of riches, because when your draft picks pan out, you start having to pay these guys. And I like JD. I like what he brings to the table. Still very, very young, and I'll talk about him next section when we talk about the young core. But you are going to have to evaluate what your front court depth looks like in the future. And if you don't really have any floor spacing in the front court, if Isaiah Stewart's going to continue to just be a defensive-minded backup center instead of really spacing the floor whatsoever, then the decision has to be made on Jalen Duren whether or not you think he can develop more of an offensive bag where he can operate from the high post, like a Bam Adebayo, somebody like that, or an Alperen Sengun, who has a very nice touch around the rim, can also shoot floaters, mid-ranges, not really a huge three-point threat, and I don't think Jalen Duren will ever develop a three-point shot, but you do need to see him start to work a little bit farther towards the three-point line, instead of just being simply a lob threat. For a guy that's going to be getting around $30 million a year, they have to be versatile. They have to do different things on the offensive end, and then again, the defense has to has to show improvements this year. I think that's a given right now. I think the fan base is on the same page, the front office as well. We need to see him become a better rim protector. When you look at his defensive stats last year, he was in the 91 percentile for defensive rebounds, so clearly he has potential there. His block percentage was pretty good at 89%, but his rim frequency was in the 61 percentile at 38.2%, so he doesn't really deter very many shots at the rim unless he's just standing in the paint. He doesn't rotate very well. And then again, he's very young. You're going to see that growth. And I think that, especially with a teammate like Isaiah Stewart, JD can learn from him and take some pointers on the defensive end. So there is he has a very, very, very high ceiling, but there is a lot of speculation on whether or not he can be a starting center on a championship team. That's what we're going to have to see this season. And if we do, I expect the Pistons to offer him a very, very large extension going into next year. And then moving on, last topic I want to talk about, this kind of translates to the Jalen Duren talk, the Ausar Thompson talk, is just this young core has a very, very high ceiling. There's a ton of potential there. There's a ton of guys who haven't even really tapped into their full potential yet, a lot of upside. So I do understand there's a lot of fans and a lot of people out there that are frustrated with Trajan Langdon's lack of urgency this offseason to go out and make a big splash, with the East being relatively open right now. And I agree. I get it. When you watch the Hawks go out and get Kristaps Porzingis, you watch the Magic go get Desmond Bane. Clearly, obviously, teams in the East right now are trying to make big splashes and improve their roster from top to bottom. And the Pistons really haven't shown too much urgency in doing that just yet in the offseason. I know the draft just ended and we haven't even really gotten into the bulk of free agency and trade season. But I understand there's some frustration there. But at the end of the day, you have to realize that there are so many difference makers on this team and people that can contribute who are under 25 years old. You got Cade, who's only 23. Jalen Duren is 21. Ron Holland is still 19. Jaden Ivey is 23. Ausar Thompson's 22. Isaiah Stewart's 24. You're looking at a potential starting lineup plus a sixth man of guys that are just under 25, that are very, very young. So it's hard to compare yourself to a team like the Magic, who their young core is really Franz Wagner, Paolo Banchero, and then Anthony Black, obviously. But that's 3 players. The Pistons have 6 that are very, very good players overall and solid pieces in this league. And so I don't think you necessarily have to blow it up. And again, like I talked about with the embarrassment of riches, all these players are going to have to get extended if you see them as a part of your young core. And at the end of the day, you don't really want to go and blow it up for a guy that might not complement this young core and it will kind of stunt their development. I think it's going to be very, very important that you allow these guys to continue to work together, grow together, become one unit. Because at the end of the day, in the NBA, we've seen the teams that have the most success build their core. They don't go all in on 2 or 3 players, but rather 6 or 7. So you have depth and you can have defenders on the floor at the same time. So it is important for the Pistons to just relax. The fans we just need to let Trajan Langdon do his thing. I trust what he has, I trust his judgment in this process. I think he will make a couple of moves. Like I mentioned, a guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, maybe a Santi Aldama sign and trade, something like that will improve the core, but isn't going to try and forward this rebuild by 4 or 5 years. I just don't think that's going to be the case whatsoever. And I think the Pistons are plenty happy staying put with what they have and just continuing to develop and build their camaraderie as a team. But that's really all I have for you guys today. If you haven't already, please like, subscribe, comment, turn on post notifications. Follow me on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2 for more content covering all things Detroit sports. And let me know in the comments or over on Twitter your thoughts on Nickeil Alexander-Walker. If you would be okay with the Pistons letting Dennis Schroder walk this offseason. And also let me know what you view Jalen Duren's future on this team in this young core. And with that being said, that is going to do it here for episode 11 of Pistons Daily. And I will catch you all next time.